Hello guys, this was a week of the exposed Russian weakness, of panic attacks all around Russia and in particular in Moscow, of the paralyzed Russian airlines, of dozens of Russian military objects demilitarized by Ukrainian drones. This was a week during which Putin demonstrated his total dependence on China when Xi Jinping was the host of the Moscow parade. And this was a week when the coalition of the willing, together with President Zelenskyy and potentially even with President Trump, managed to corner Putin with the offer of a 30-day ceasefire. And yesterday, during that late night, very nervous press conference, Putin did not want to accept anything and instead offered a meeting in Istanbul. And to make things more complex for Putin, Zelenskyy agreed, but only after a ceasefire. It's quite obvious that any country that wants lasting peace, real negotiations, will accept this condition. I'm sure the Kremlin goblin cannot afford that. So let's discuss these major events inside the Russian Federation that exposed its weakness. And a very important fact, Russia can and will be defeated. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see the collapse of the Kremlin, subscribe and demonstrate your solidarity with Ukraine by sharing these videos. And let's start perhaps with this epitome of demilitarization inside Russia. The main reason why it was so easy for us to target their military objects is the lack of air defense in Russia and the fact they needed to move all of it around Moscow to protect the pathetic and, by the way, very poor, very weak in comparison with the previous ones, Moscow parade. When planning his blitzkrieg, Putin definitely did not expect that after 3 years of his full-scale aggression, Ukraine will only grow stronger, same as the will of our friends to support Ukraine in the way to achieve lasting peace, and that is to defeat and demilitarize Russia. So, during this week, Ukrainian drones neutralized a drone command point in Tyotkino, which is a settlement in Kursk region. And yes, despite whatever Russia tries to say, Ukrainian armed forces control parts of Kursk region and control parts of Belgorod region. Once again, Russian weakness exposed, and definitely a thing no one could have imagined back in 2022. So, as I record this video, actually another oil refinery is burning in Yamalo-Nenetsk Autonomous District, really far away from Ukraine, and I think it may be in the result of the traditional Russian negligence. But it's kind of very symbolic that all of that exploding, burning in the moment when Putin is very seriously cornered by a 4D chess play of the coalition of the willing. But we'll speak about that next after I enumerate at least some of those important objects demilitarized during this week. So, first of all, drone command point in Tyotkino of the Kursk region. Then a serious military plant in Tatarstan, the same one in Saransk and in Moscow region. Among the objects, there were important production facilities for fiber drones in Saransk. You know that fiber drones are in fashion these days. You also know that NATO needs Ukraine with all the experience of real modern warfare. And by targeting such objects, we, of course, not only demilitarize Russia, but we also save lots of innocent lives. So that was a victory, and that was definitely a strategy to use the opportunity when the majority of the Russian air defense is moved to Moscow to keep targeting and destroying evil arsenals, evil locations, and thus making this world a safer place. Like it if you like the idea and the strategy, and please subscribe, that's important. Moscow was paralyzed as they were preparing for a parade. Putin had several panic attacks, I'm sure of that, specifically when more than 24 hours the majority of Russian airlines were paralyzed. It was a serious aviation collapse. Actually, Russia has serious troubles with air flights, first of all, because of sanctions that work really effectively and they cannot maintain their aircraft. And they were begging for these sanctions to be lifted. That was one of the first moves after Trump took the office. And also, not many countries actually have connections, direct connections with Moscow, but Ukrainian drones visiting Russian skies led not just to the demilitarization of objects, but also to this total collapse of their airports. Many, like thousands of Russians, had to stay in the airports of some peripheral small cities, and they did not have hotels there. And perhaps during these long hours, they discussed the success of Putin's special military operation that somehow returned to dozens of Russian regions. That is the new reality. Just think about that. Regions under the control of the Ukrainian army. Literally no work of airports in Russia. They cannot protect themselves. They were totally unprepared to defend themselves as classical bullies. And this Putin's dependence on foreign support, on North Korean soldiers, on Chinese money, on weapons became super vivid, super evident during the Moscow parade. First of all, they lacked tremendously armored vehicles, tanks, and aviation. Well, because we keep destroying that junk and demilitarizing Russia. But they invited Xi Jinping, perhaps as a part of the air defense. I do like this joke, but it is definitely true. Putin was using him as a shield. Compare that to a visit of Macron, Starmer, Merz, and Tusk to Kyiv. Three beautiful people smiling, joking, walking, talking with ordinary citizens, and those pathetic dictators with Botox cheeks sitting cheek to cheek. And many people comment that during that Moscow parade they had very loud Chinese translation, that you could not hear Putin, you could hear the Chinese translation all around the Red Square in Moscow. What if not soft occupation that is? And I do hope that the greatest deal maker, Donald Trump, sees how close Putin and Xi is. And this contact is unbreakable. This kind of partnership is unbreakable. Please accept that you cannot be friends with China or Russia if you respect freedom, human life, and even trade and, some private property and things like that. Plus, the basis of Chinese, of Russian ideology is not even authoritarianism, communism, or something else. It's anti-Americanism. They hate it. So there is no way you can build normal partnership with these countries. And Xi Jinping now knows that Putin is his slave, his serf, belongs to him. And the Moscow parade demonstrated it very, very, very vividly. And in contrast to that was yesterday's meeting in Kyiv. It was beautiful. I loved all the photos. I shared 1 million of them on X. Subscribe, I'm still fighting there. And these were beautiful people who respect each other, who respect Ukraine, who respect freedom, who are decisive. And they finally made an ultimatum to Putin that if he wants any negotiations, everything must start with a ceasefire on the 12th of May. They have also outplayed Trump, who still does not know what to do with his favorite dictator, Vladimir. And they kind of quoted Trump, glorified Trump. I'm sure it was done with a pinch of salt, with exaggeration, but it was a way to make Trump involved and to prepare new sanctions, to provide Ukraine with weapons, and finally press Putin to make a decision. What is interesting, HIMARS, ATACMS, Patriot missiles were allowed to be delivered to Ukraine yesterday, which is great news and also quite symbolic. Like it, as I like it. And it was also interesting that I think even Trump understands that Putin wants to continue this bloody negotiations while targeting Ukrainian cities, killing Ukrainian children, pretending that he is speaking, that he is out of isolation, that he is a new friend of Trump and Witkoff. I guess like it became pretty obvious, and I'm sure that Merz, Starmer, Macron, Tusk, Zelenskyy know how to explain it even to people who don't want to know that. And this speed, this pressure made Putin feel very troubled, and that is why he announced that press conference, which was very pathetic. But you know, I have to make this coming out. I was stupid enough to wait for that press conference yesterday. It was like 2 a.m. in Ukraine, and that was a silly decision because today I want to sleep and I'm irritated because I knew before the press conference that nothing normal, nothing serious, nothing important will come out of it, but somehow I decided to scroll and wait. It was funny how long it took. Perhaps Putin was panicking. He did not know how to react. He had to react. And he pretended he did not hear the offer about this 30-day ceasefire and instead offered a meeting in Istanbul. And Trump kept repeating that in the morning, but Zelenskyy outplayed everyone because he decided not to contradict the greatest deal maker Donald Trump and agreed to meeting Putin in Istanbul personally, but remembering a very important basic condition on which Trump also agreed, same as the coalition of the willing, only if unconditional lasting ceasefire starts on the 12th of May. Let me know in the comments below, do you think it will start? And no, of course, no serious negotiations are possible. Everyone knows that in Ukraine. Putin also wants to continue this war in summer, specifically with a new offensive. Intelligence proves that. We know that here in Ukraine. So it's just a smokescreen, a way to stop Trump from supporting Ukraine, to make everyone quarrel. But it seems like the coalition of the willing is smarter and more experienced than the pathetic Kremlin goblin and his panda friend. And this was also a week when Putin marked 25 years of his reign. Kadyrov seems to resign, and the first gone. And Lukashenko also spoke about some problems, I don't know, but guys, this is so pathetic that these people destroy lives of so many good people for decades. It is not okay to be a president for 25, 30 years. You don't need to prove anything else. Just this term is enough to understand that it is very wrong. But I think right now Putin is seriously cornered. He has nothing to say. He planned to continue pretending that he is negotiating, and he cannot afford millions of Russian soldiers returning back home, and you know how violent they are, especially after they lose an opportunity to loot and earn bloody money. Let's see what happens. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think Zelenskyy and Putin will meet in Istanbul? At this particular moment in time, I think they won't, because I believe Putin will not support the ceasefire, and that's an important condition, even if we all want to follow the advice of Trump. I'm being a little bit ironic here, and check my new video on the new channel where I share more of life in times of the big war from a civilian perspective, and there I answer some questions about money in Ukraine. Can you use Apple Pay? Can you use Google Pay? Do we have cards? How do we get cash in times of blackouts? Also, I introduce you to Ukrainian hryvnia and show you all of our banknotes, which are considered one of the most beautiful in the world, and I totally agree with that. So check and remember to subscribe to that channel. That's a great joy and honor to me. Also follow me on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord, all the links in the description of this video, same as a link to our merch shop with lots of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. That's an honor. And most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!